Hey guys, Jeremy here with Simple Life. Quick little project for the morning. I've had this Black Fox Knife Works grinder for over a month now, and I don't have a layout here that's gonna work where I can use it. We're gonna get rid of this workbench. I'm gonna bring back the original stand that I had for that grinder. We're gonna find a new stand for that grinder and then one for the disc grinder. Hopefully I can have all three machines here and have room for them all. The reason I can't just lay this one on top of here is the height is quite a bit different. This one has the integrated VFD in the bottom and it sits quite a bit higher. So if I were to just set it on here, the platen would actually be about right here. The bottom of the platen would be at about the top of this one here. So I'm gonna do some reconfiguring. Really excited to get this thing done. So the first thing we gotta do is kind of clear everything out of the area so that we've got some room to work. And I did an interesting wiring job on these motors, and I have all the wires underneath this workbench. You'll kind of see it when we're done. So I need to disconnect everything. It's not just unbolt it from the table. I actually have to undo the wiring. One little thing I like to do is take photos of things as I undo them. And then I also go a step further and I write down the color of the line coming into the motor. And then I'll just take that one out and put it back with the other two wires that it went with. One thing with the VFD, if you ever want to change the direction, you can just switch any two of the wires, and you just switch any two of the three main power wires in, and that will change the direction of the motor on a three-phase motor. Sorry, did I say VFD? I don't know. So there it is. Now, when I had done this one, I put this hinge on to make it go to horizontal. It's kind of a dirty way to do it, but I did it, and the even dirtier is I just welded it to the base of the grinder. Now that's not the factory base, that was a different one that I'd made. I needed a longer one so that I could mount the motor to it. But had I known that in about 2 years time I would just be grinding this off again, I probably wouldn't have not put as much weld on there. Even there were some holes in the hinge that were, for bolting it to something or putting some screws in. I filled those suckers up, so I had to get in there with a die grinder and clean it all out. Now, I'm going to be switching this grinder to a dedicated vertical grinder, so I don't really care for the back and forth. And that Black Fox grinder, that's the one that I'm going to be using as my horizontal grinder when I need to, because it's got a really slick system. I'll put a link up in the corner to the initial review I did on that grinder. I've barely gotten a chance to use it, and I've actually pulled it out a few times, set it on sawhorses, and used it. So I thought, it's high time I get this done. I was hoping this would just take me till noon one day, but it ended up taking me about 6 hours of work to get this thing done. But sometimes you need to. It's really important too, when I'm switching between metal and wood. I find I spend so much time changing out tooling or belts, and even if you can just leave one tool set up on a grinder like my contact wheel, I think it's going to make a big difference for my production standpoint. When you're working on one single knife, it's nice if you can go back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. So we'll see how good it goes, but I'm really excited to have two belt grinders going. Now, one thing, you see that hole I had cut in, that was actually clearance for the motor, and then that 2x4 is what part of the grinder rested on to hold it horizontal when I flipped it over. And this is the underside, all that crazy wiring I was talking about. I just didn't want wires hanging down, and then mostly the bottom shelf of this workbench was for my dust collection hoses. So this actually worked really good. And you can see that I actually just drilled holes the size of the wire and ran them up through there and then terminated all the connections. So that way I had really clean, from my VFD to the motor itself was nice and clean. I didn't have any cables above the surface. And it looked a little weird, but it sure worked well. Definitely made it for a little bit more work taking it all apart though. And then I just got these carriage bolts holding my disc grinder down. This is the one thing of this project that I think is going to take me the most work, because I don't have a stand that I can use for the disc grinder. Also, I want to make an adjustable work rest for it. But yeah, it's a great tool to have. I love it. And then, it's the same thing, exact same way to disconnect it as with the other one. These are two different VFDs, but the wiring is exactly the same between the two of them. And I just got to fish out the cords, the hoses, and I thought it's a lot easier just to undo the end where I plug it into the wall than inside the VFD. So I just did that, pull it out, and then we can take that VFD off. Those are very cheap brackets that I made. They ended up doing the job, but I'm going to be replacing these when I put everything back together. And pretty much the exact same thing to get this big VFD off. So with all that gone, I think now I can start taking the table out. I have to remove that 2x4, it's screwed in from the bottom, and then I had a couple screws holding the top of this wood down. Also, I put some caulking on the back there, and so it was kind of sticking, just had to peel that back a little bit. I am going to put some new tin and stick it up underneath this existing tin, just so that I can kind of keep... I like having that metal protection on the wall, and then also with this garage, there's a little ledge near the floor there, and I don't want grindies to kind of build up to that, so you'll see when I go put the tin in, I actually kind of leave it at an angle, and that doesn't really bother me, because the worst thing is if you get a layer of metal grindies, that stuff can actually be fairly flammable, so it's always a concern of mine, and I thought if I can just let it all fall into the wall. Sometimes I've heard of guys actually their walls starting on fire inside the walls, enough grinding dust gets in there, and some of it ignites, so... Figure let's not mess around with that at all. Let's just cover it all in with some tin. I hate cutting tin. This is probably the least favorite thing, and anything I make or any type of building I've ever done, I don't know what it is about cutting sheet metal with shears like this. It is so unenjoyable to me. And then just get rid of those belts there. I'm going to continue to use that belt storage. That won't change. But this was a bear to get these installed. It's actually a lot more difficult than it looked like. There's some real-time struggle just so you have a sense of how hokey-pokey this was. I actually cut out a lot of footage because I wrestled with this stuff for a long time. But eventually got it in there, and... yeah, I wanted to make sure I could tuck it in from the bottom just so that dust, again, can't get behind there. Everything will just fall down. And then you can see how we just go over the ledge there. It's slightly angled out. But again, I'd rather have all that dust just sit on the floor so I can vacuum it than, you know, get in that little ledge between there and the wall. Alright, so with that done, now, well, I guess I gotta do a little celebration jig, but I also need to head out and grab the original stand for this grinder. This stand's, I don't know where it came from. It's from my brother-in-law, I don't know what's history, but I couldn't throw it away, and I'm glad I didn't. Unfortunately, it is completely frozen to the ground. Well, it was a lot easier definitely just to get the truck than struggle with it. I was debating on getting my tractor, but I thought I don't think I need that much pulling power. And yeah, the old shiny Chevy had no issues whatsoever. So again, this is one that I had in my shipping container shop, and then when I moved into the garage, I thought, you know what, I'd like it all on one bench, but that was before I had a second 2x72, so everything's coming back around full circle. Now, there are a couple tabs that I had cut off. I didn't film that stuff because it was just grinding outside, but it's where I had my motor mounted previously, was actually on that post, and it worked really, really well. It's very robust, very heavy. I think one of the little modifications I'd like to do down the road is just to put some leveling jacking bolts just because there's the slightest little wobble in it. When I'm grinding, it doesn't bother me, but it would be nice to have, just a couple little bolts that I could jack down. Sometimes I just use washers and shim it up there, and it just works fine. Now, with this mounting plate, different than the factory one, the holes that I had wouldn't line up, and so I had to drill some new holes here, and you can see I'm drilling at an angle. That is purely out of necessity. I just didn't have clearance to have a straight hole come down and still have enough room. So I had to come in at an angle, especially on the right-hand side on the screen there. And it's kind of fun tracing my pilot hole. So I drilled those little pilot holes just for easy marking. And then I'm going at this. So I drilled out a 5/16 so I can tap it to a 3/8. And then got the old tap sockets there. Like those things. I've got a video, Tool Time Tuesday, about those. Maybe I'll put a link up in the corner. I think this video might have a lot of links to other Tool Time Tuesday videos because I'm using a lot of tools that I've done dedicated videos on in this video. It's weird. Toothbrush. Toothbrush is one of my favorite little things when I'm doing machining stuff. If you can just clean off those chips from your tap between each hole, it makes a big difference in how well it cuts. And even sometimes there, you'll see I kind of clean it out from the bottom so that even when I'm coming out, I don't risk chance of pulling any of that debris, those little metal shards, and kind of gumming up the threads a bit. So I love a toothbrush. I really don't do any tapping without a toothbrush. And then I have to drill the whole 3/8. Oh, just slammed my hand right there. That hurt. Actually broke the skin a little bit, but I figured while I got it on the ground there on the rubber mat, I may as well just enlarge those holes. And I drilled them out to 7/16 because I'm just going to use a 3/8 bolt. That way I have a little bit of wiggle room. And I don't even know if those holes were necessary, but I thought, may as well put something in the back there. Always a good idea when you're bolting pretty much anything up, if you can just finger tighten them, don't snug anything up. That way you've got room to line all the holes as you continue to put more fasteners in. Then once all the fasteners are in, then you can go ahead and start torquing everything together. It just helps for assembly work. So the next part of the process is I need to build a bracket for the VFD to go onto. So I'm just going to start lopping and hacking. I'm just really going to come off at a 45 degrees, kind of like an arm, and then it'll be a 22.5 degree cut times 2, which will bring us back to vertical so that the post is going upright, and then I put a weird angle cut just so I can kick back the VFD at a certain angle, just so it's not perfectly straight up and down, but I didn't want it 45 degrees either. So here is the cold cut chop saw. Got a video about that, link in the corner, I think, if all these links work properly. And man, this tool, I am a huge fan. I use it all the time, and it has been so rock solid for me. Hey, there's a portable bandsaw. I could put a video about that one, except I don't think they actually let us use that many cards that close together, so we'll just leave that for now. Now, my welder is a piece of HUD. It's a terrible welder. I'm not going to say which brand it is. It hardly works. And then also, I'm not the greatest welder myself, but I can get things to stick together, and usually they don't ever come apart, so for the purpose of what I do with this welding machine, fantastic. And then this will be the new flat bar that the actual VFD will mount to. This thing I'm doing entirely, this project, is all with scraps as well. It's just stuff that I've got, I've been saving, I've been keeping around. Even the workbench, when I took it out, I actually took my portable bandsaw and I chopped it down into usable lengths of steel so that I can reuse it in another project. Now, when I originally started putting this footage together, there's about 8 hours worth of video, and I started editing it all in as one entire project. And I think by the time I'm done with this one, we're almost at 20 minutes. So this is going to be part 1. Part 2 will be the stand that I repurposed for the Black Fox grinder, and then part 3 will be the stand for the disc grinder. And then who knows, maybe we'll have part 4 will be the new dust collection system and the adjustable work rest for the disc grinder. I'm not sure, but I was debating whether I should do like a 40-minute or a 50-minute video, but I don't know. I've never done those before, and some YouTubers that I actually enjoy upload very long videos, but I never make it to the end. I figure if it's enough to be one video, then we'll just keep it at one. So I just marked out those holes for the VFD, and then I'm going to tap them. And interesting thing happens here is that I broke this tap, and I had done a Tool Time Tuesday on Walton tap extractors, and so many people said they don't ever work. Well, if you just wait just a moment, I pull them out here and I show you how effective they truly are. There it is. So there will be a link in the corner to this Tool Time Tuesday where you can learn about these odd looking little critters. I just like to clean out the holes because essentially what we have is these little pins that slide down through the flutes, and then you put this locking collar down that kind of keeps the pressure on it. These do need to be used with caution. It's not like it's just some ignorant tool you kind of put it on there and crank. You do need to finesse it a little bit, but I have had these work pretty much always for me. I think my success rate with these is just phenomenal. But if you notice my actions here, what I'm going to do is put my tap wrench on. I lock it in place, but I'm not just going like a roid monkey on it, right? I mean, I'm just kind of gradually, and you gotta feel for it, and you gotta be a little bit gingerly and a lot of downward pressure. But this thing saved the day. Just like that. And this would have been really a bummer because I left that bar exactly the right length. And so I would have either had to just not have one bolt in, which wouldn't have been a big deal. I mean, I've got 4 quarter 20 bolts holding that VFD on it. It's a little more than you would need, but it was really nice just to be able to, like, yep, do that. And then I chased that hole again with a brand new tap. But those little die extractors or tap extractors, they work really, really well. So now I'm just grinding some of the paint. The paint that was on here, again, I don't know the history of this stand, but it was like an epoxy paint. It's incredibly thick. And so I just grind that away, and then roughly I'd fit up where I want this handle to go, or where I want this little arm to come off of. And then now we'll just weld it on. The nice thing with this is I've got access to the cover to get into the wiring, and then also it doesn't impede the motor fan at all, or even the fan shroud. I can take that off. This isn't in the way at all. So, and yet it still keeps the VFD close to the grinder. So we'll put it on there and you have to see what it looks like. I just wanted to make sure I was happy with the position of it while I'm working and dancing, just to make sure it wasn't going to bother me. And then once I thought it was good, we'll commit to it and we'll slap it in place with some bubble gum. I did throw some paint on here, and so this was after that. I didn't film the painting of it because I thought that's... I can tell you, I painted it. Now I needed to trim some of the cable off because we weren't obviously running way underneath the table to Grandma's house and through the woods. And so I had a lot of extra cable on there. And one little trick, I don't know where I saw this, but I've been doing this for years. If you need to get rid of, like, break the outer sheath on some of these cables, if you just fold them over really tight and you barely touch them with a razor blade, it just makes a really quick incision, and it doesn't even come close to touching the wires that are inside of that main housing. So it's a handy little trick, and I use it all the time. And then hooking it up was really, really easy because we had those little labels on the morettes or the wire nuts, and everything worked out well. And I tell you, I never used to do little things like take photos of what I'm taking apart or just labeling wire nuts before I disassemble them. But, you know, there's no thinking to it. You just put it back together when it's all done, and, you know, you took that step in the beginning, and it sure pays off. A lot less headaches and frustrations, you know, when you're going to put things back together. I forgot that I had the direction selector switch in the neutral position, so it wasn't going anywhere. I thought it wasn't going to work, but it worked. But check out that dust. We must have created a lot of grinding dust in here, a lot more than I had anticipated, because yeah, that was quite a bit. Anyways, basically, really happy to have this back on its own independent stand. It also gives me room when I'm trying to figure where I want things. I can just move them around the shop now. And so the next video in this little series is going to be a stand that I'm going to repurpose for the new grinder. I'm really excited about that. And then I'm a little concerned still that I don't have enough room for the disc grinder in here, but I've got a possible workaround for that. I don't know what stand I'm going to use, but that will be coming down the pike in this little video series as well. There you have it, guys. Step 1, this first little step in this project to reconfigure the grinding area is complete. I hope you liked that video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so already. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.